Hello, everybody. This is your host, Crystal. This is another edition of the 9 o'clock Meltdown podcast. And over speakerphone, I have the extremely talented, fingers in way too many pies, Duluth Poetry Chapter President, Jess Morgan. Hello.
Hi. Thanks for having me on board. I'm really excited.
Yes, Jess, thank you so much for coming along with me today. I've wanted to interview you for quite a while. You definitely have your fingers in all the pies. There are points where I think I'm like living my past life through you. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting and then hilarious at some points, but that is not why we're here. We are here because you just released a poetry book called Too Many Hats, and I have it right now in my hot little hands. The front cover is absolutely gorgeous. As soon as you gave it to me, I read it front to cover. There were times that some of the poems brought me to tears, others just made me laugh. You kind of hit a little bit of everything in this poetry book. So let's jump into it. It looks like you've got 77 poems in this book, and I think in the front cover here, you said it was brought about by, was it ARAC or ARC?
Yeah, so I was really excited to get a Arrowhead Regional Arts Council grant to help with the process of like printing it, and then for some of my time like putting it together. And then I applied for a Minnesota State Arts Board grant too, and I used like a small portion of that for some of my time, like writing or editing, like putting it together too. So it was really nice to. I was really excited to get some grant funds, and it kind of pushed me to like stick on some timelines and to like finally do the thing. So
That's absolutely fabulous. Now, just to kind of maybe hit the business side of things right away, because you talked about grants and things like that. Now, there are grants out there for artists, or there's more like blanket grants that you can go after. I know my time at the Arrowhead Regional Arts Council on the board, we'd review different projects that kind of came our way. It was more of you would write an essay about what you want to do, maybe submit some sample work of yours, and then it would kind of be voted upon from there. Was that process kind of daunting for you at all? I mean, for somebody who's maybe looking at getting a grant, how was that process for you?
yeah, I think that the process for this one. So I think that for the Minnesota State Arts Board, that process felt a little bit more daunting than the ARAC one. I think there's like more for me to fill out. I was applying for like a larger budget for the other one. I also feel really thankful that I had like I was able to check in and just ask a mentor about a few things. So Brian Bawara has been like kind of mentoring me a little bit, or like pushing me to apply for some grants. So I feel really thankful for like some of their like guidance, or just like to kind of use them as a soundboard during the process. And that helps quite a lot. I think for applying for the Arrowhead Regional Arts Council one, I think I felt it felt like less daunting, and I didn't have a lot of time to do it actually for this time around. So I kind of like put my ADHD hat on and hyper focused really hard, and like made sure I got it out on time. I applied kind of in the scope of so I like really, really value community, and I think that's something that I talk about in this book a lot, but I wanted to like understand more of like the process for putting a book together, because I want to better be able to like mentor other people too. And I think if I were to like, there's been a lot of things that I've been wanting to write about that feel really timely, and I wanted to make sure that like if I wanted to put a book out fast, that I like knew what that process would be like. So I think that like because I was applying for this grant in the scope of like what I can do to like advance my own arts things, with the way that I could also bring that to like other people and kind of help them also like do this process. It kind of helped. I don't know. I just felt like very motivated, but very focused on like this specific project. So like filling out the ARAC one felt, I guess I did it really like kind of like really quick and like with a lot of attention, and then it didn't feel as daunting as maybe when I applied for the Minnesota State's Arts Board grant, where I was like a little bit unsure about like how to apply for that. and like unsure like about how I wanted to utilize some of those. And I think the longer that I've been like doing art and like kind of like the more often that I stick with it, my like focus and attention on like what is the next thing gets like honed in better, if that kind of makes sense. So
It
I think that
does.
like
Yeah.
yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. So basically, what you're saying is, chasing after those grants and things like that can be a little daunting. I mean, especially if you're writing an essay about your
Mhm.
work or about yourself personally. But at the end of the day, just do it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely like if you're thinking about it, like definitely just do it. I think that like in the process of applying for it, even if you don't get it that time or if you feel like you weren't sure like super how to navigate it, it's like good practice for if you apply for the next one. Like I think just like continuing to create and like put yourself out there is like kind of like a skill that you can sharpen as you do it. So it's like worthwhile to like try the process.
Perfect. Wise words. Wise words. Excellent. So, Jess, you, besides being a poet and the president of the Duluth Poetry Chapter, you're also a photographer as well. How did that journey kind of get started with you? I remember kind of taking you on some of my photo shoots a little bit. Maybe I threw way too much at you. Maybe I didn't throw enough. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah.
But how
I
did,
did
yeah.
it was really cool. I feel like I learned kind of like a little bit of the flow watching you kind of like do different photo shoots and stuff too.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I actually picked up photography initially because I studied English in college, so like I focused on poetry a lot, but I also focused on journalism, and I worked for my school newspaper, and I interned at like a magazine and a radio station during my college experience. So I actually picked up photography initially because sometimes while I was doing like freelance journalism, people also wanted to see if I could submit photos. So if I like added photos to my journalism journey, I could make a little bit more money. But it was also just like made so much sense to add in that skill. I also grew up with like a family that really like valued photography. So my dad was a wedding photographer for a while. While I've worn my DJing hat and TJ'd weddings, I like come across photographers a lot, and I've always just loved like talking with them and watching them. So like if I'm DJing, I'm like watching what they're doing or like coordinating with them. So I think it's something that I like observed a lot, and then I just wanted to like pair with these other things that I was doing. Like if I'm at something and there's like stuff going on, it makes sense to like be able to try to like capture that from an event lens, or like from a writing lens to kind of like further integrate what I'm able to document. And that kind of just like because of the way my ADHD works and I get excited about things, that naturally just like led into what if I did portraits? What if I did this? And I just got really excited to try to like get artful with it when I can. But yeah, I kind of like took it up from a very like practical way of like, I'm writing these articles, they want photos, can I do that? And then it just kind of became a little bit of a excited thing that happened from there too.
Perfect. It kind of sounds like it molded itself together in a very organic way.
Yeah, it did really feel like I picked it up kind of organically, and I kind of started small. Like I could like barely afford a camera at the time I got it. I just kind of like, I like took out my first credit card to like get the camera, and then like paid for it over time through doing photography. I like only had the kit lens for a time, but then was like really crafty with it. And then eventually, when I did apply for the Minnesota State Arts Board grant, I did like factor in like a lens that I had been really excited to maybe have at some point. COVID was like really weird, I think, for a lot of artists, and people had like different standings in that. But there was like a lens that like once I had stimulus money come in, I like got like the other one. So I've been like working with like three lenses I really like. But yeah, maybe I'm getting too like in the specifics, but
No,
yeah,
Jess, you're fine.
yeah, I think that like it was a thing that organically just kind of added to my juggle.
And that's actually where the title comes in for this book. It's called Too Many Hats. But then on the back, you have this fun little cartoon of this gal juggling hats. Um, and that's absolutely fabulous. And actually, maybe a side note, you did my wedding photography as well. So
Yeah.
you're also a wedding photographer. And they turned out absolutely beautiful. I couldn't have asked for a better person to do them. And when I went to get the get the pictures. Your website is called Hat Juggler or Too Many Hats? One of
Yeah,
those
I
two.
was at the time I was thinking I was gonna start a website that was either called Too Many Hats or Hat Jugglers. So like the name of this book was actually like the name of a blog that I really wanted to do, but the ironic part of that is that I was always juggling so many hats that I didn't have enough time to do the blog. But I really love poetry and like I like feel like I just need to like process like what I'm doing in my life. So it's like the poetry kind of happened a little bit more organically than like trying to put a blog together. And so I think that's why I think like things that are organic just kind of stick in my juggle and things that aren't kind of don't. Which maybe, I don't know, is kind of, yeah, I don't know, maybe it's kind of weird, but I think that like part of this, part of juggling hats for me is that like I have ADHD and like having a full-time job like feels very inorganic to me. And so I think I'm like always just trying to figure out like if I do kind of follow like my instincts or like if I kind of let my brain do its thing, like what is it trying to do? Like what do I do well because I have ADHD versus like there's certain things that are difficult, but there's certain things that come like very naturally to me that I think are really valuable and like not as common maybe to come across and how people move through the world. Yeah, I think I forgot where I was going with that, but yeah. So originally it was like I wanted to do a blog or a website called Too Many Hats. It ended up being a poetry book instead, which I'm really thrilled about. And on the back, the art that you mentioned, my friend Jamie that I met through working at a comic store with them, they did the drawing on the back because I was really pretty serious about wanting to do the website Hat Jugglers. At some point, I might like throw that into the juggle, but I think it's going to be less. It would be more like about like how to move through the world with ADHD or like how to do the juggle versus like my art itself. So now I have a website that's Jess Scribe, like JessCribe.com. That's more about like my art and kind of like more of a personal like Jess doing their thing. So at some point I would like to have both, but I think now, I think Too Many Hats is a little bit like about my journey of trying to become a better juggler. I think I juggle things a lot better now, where before I was like not sure how to do it. So I think this book is a little bit of like showing my figuring out stuff too.
Right, right. And I was gonna say in the book you mention a few times, excuse me, coming across having ADHD and being more diagnosed as an adult than versus a kid. And then you talk about, you know, your love for Duluth, you know, all the different jobs that you've had, things like that. It's absolutely fabulous. And you know, in a way, we're kind of a kindred spirit that way. I got diagnosed with ADHD as well as a number of other things as an adult as well. And to be honest, it was quite eye-opening for me that it just explains so much in my life because, you know, I was really heavy into the photography thing, then I was really heavy into the music scene, and now I'm back in the theater scene again. So I kind of bounce back and forth. I go through these moments of being super intense on something and then switch to something else. Have you kind of found that in your life as well? Or have you adapted being able to juggle all those things at once?
Yeah. It's definitely a little bit of like I definitely set some hats down. I like have too many of them to always have them all in the air all at the same time. I think that like having a few main ones at any given time works best. And I think that like part of your gravitation towards that is like also why like I have valued getting to know you more and like being your friend too. I think that I have a tendency to organically like get surrounded by other people who are like neurodivergent or have ADHD just because we like understand like we like kind of move through things a little bit differently. We kind of like I like need to see examples or like kind of need each other through that or we give each other patience or maybe some people like don't understand certain things. But yeah, I think it's interesting because there's certain things that I'll like be absolutely in love with and I won't be able to like stay away from them and I'll want to read about them all the time and I like can't like I'll definitely hyperfix on them for a while. I think for a long time like the clarinet was like one of my first loves and I like all through like for high school for a while, I just wanted to do nothing but try to be in like every single like band or music, like play with the clarinet in every space possible.
Yeah.
And that was really nice. But then I think like by the time I was going to go to college, people were like, oh, you're going to keep still doing that. But I think I was like losing focus of that a little bit. And I was really wanting to like move into a different spot musically. So I think people were like very confused. And really actually want to go to college immediately and to take a gap year to be like, what am I doing? What am I going to do now? Like, what is the thing going to be? I did go to college right away. That's like kind of a little bit of a different story. But in doing that, I like kind of like started falling in love with like jazz or improv and kind of like found a different way to like contextualize that. And I think sometimes it's not as much as like completely dropping something, but finding a new way to like understand it or like a different way to like contextualize it. And I think when I add another hat and then incorporate like a different one, it kind of like helps me like appreciate a thing I've already had appreciation for. And sometimes I'll set it down for several years where like I think that the clarinet is something I like definitely spent a lot of time away from and am like coming back to more, and like I'm coming back to music more. Sometimes I think like there'll be something that just feels like it's like blocking my access to it, where like it's just not enjoyable, or like it just kind of, and then I'll like get excited about something else, so I won't really worry about that as much. But then I think like I think like understanding a lot more different things, or like kind of understanding more things on a deeper level, you gain appreciation for the things that you already appreciate. But like you contextualize them, and like it's like your understanding of them becomes richer, I think. I don't know if you've experienced that too through like, I mean, like I'm sure that like doing theater and photography or other things, you've also maybe gained like a richer experience of some of those things.
Oh, definitely. Throughout my time with the Duluth Playhouse, I definitely gained an appreciation and a huge expanse of knowledge for theater, but more so the backside of theater, so the technical side.
Yeah.
I learned,
think that, yeah.
yeah, I learned about sound and props and all of that. I definitely have a huge appreciation for those things, and I can do them. Whether or not I can do them well, that's up to the eye of the beholder, but I can do them. But just something that you had mentioned, and something that you mentioned throughout your poetry book here, is community. And now I know that both you and I have a strong community sense. And something that you also said earlier was people try kind of follow each other and kind of come together organically. And I truly believe that. I truly believe that there are multiple different facets of community within a larger community. So I'm very glad to know you. I'm very glad that we're friends. I'm so glad that we're doing this interview finally. But let's kind of jump into the community sense. And you had touched on community, but really, what does that mean to you? Kind of where are you going with it? What do you hope to gain out of it, or to give back?
Yeah. I think like kind of like bridging on what we were just talking about a little bit too. So I think that like a lot of like different art forms are like, and like identity, like everything is like very intersectional. And I think that like by like finding intersections between like different like hats that I'm wearing, I think I find intersections between identity. I find intersections between like different people, and like I don't know, how people are just like connected, and like relationships between things. I think like as a poet, I'm really interested in like what people's relationship is to like place, or like to each other, or like or to their community. And then I think like yeah, and I think that like my approach to like community things has been like pretty organic too. Like whenever I've kind of like fallen into like another state of like organizing or being in a spot, it's like been kind of led either like by my curiosity, or like being like kind of like my desire to get to know people who are like doing a certain thing, and just to kind of like understand. It's like a part of understanding it better. Like when I'm like interested in any like specific topic more, I think like finding the intersections between like what are the people who are doing it, and how are they doing it, and why do they care about it, has been like organically an intersection there too. So I think that like I think that, I don't know, I think I'm really communal by nature. I talk about this in the book a little bit, but I grew up in a multi-generational household as a kid. And I was just like around different people all the time. So I think like from a young age, I just understood that like people do stuff in different ways, but we like have all these like certain things in common too. I like grew up with like great grandparents, and my parents and my younger brothers in like one house for a time. And I think it just like changed the way that I saw like people working together. I think that like I think that too, like doing like being a clarinetist for a while, and I was like first chair for a while. I think that eventually like being really good at something actually can kind of become lonely. And I think that like somewhere along the way I was like, I don't know if I want to just kind of keep trying to be the best at the clarinet, and I just wasn't like fueled by competition. Like I came at the clarinet from like, I wonder what I can do with this. I wonder if I can like get like good at this. Like it was very much like an exploration of my own interest in it. So like I was really excited when I was doing really well and like getting first chair or like getting a perfect score at state or whatever was happening, or getting into a good university. But like trying to be the best at it was like not how I felt about it. And I think that like there are certain times where people are like, oh well, like they're just gonna like be the best at it, so why do I need to try? And I was like, because it's fun. I don't know. So like I think that like part of it is that like I think part of me trying to like do a book so like I can help other people do a book is just like I just want us all to have nice things. I think that it's like more fun. I feel less alone if I'm like doing it with other people. I think like art is a lot richer when you do it from a community lens, like when you're collaborating or when you're like figuring out something together, because I think that like it's fun to be interested and curious about something alone, but it's like way more fun to like do that with another person too, or like to think about like how they think about something the same or different.
Right.
Yeah, so I think it's like I think that part of it comes from like a little bit of an altruistic place, and then part of it is just like, well, I don't know, it's fun, and it's like it makes me feel like more connected, and I like feeling connected.
Right, right. And I think that's why I have a love for theater so much, is it's very much so a communal kind of thing. It's a team effort. You know, you have the actors on stage, but you also have the prop master, the stage manager, the director, the sound and lights people. You know, it takes a community to push that forward. And, you
Yeah,
know, even
everything takes a village. So I think that like I like being aware of that. Like, and like I think I like to evaluate like how do I fit into that? How do I help? Like what do I bring to the table there? What do I value about what other people bring? How do I help like myself and other people like bring like the thing that they're best at or most excited about to the table? And
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Something that I found very interesting, and it's not just you that's brought this up. So in this book, you talk about neurodivergence, and that's kind of a newer term that's come about, at least on my plate anyway. But Alan, who's also a fellow poet in town, is doing a excuse me, a Victorian slideshow of sorts on neurodivergence and kind of what that looks like in the community. And neurodivergence is it's these barriers that you and I both have, that Alan has, that, you know, multiple people have in their lives, but, you know, we look completely quote normal on the outside, but on the inside, you know, you have different things going on. So I think it's really cool that neurodivergence is now getting a light shown upon it. You know, even when I was doing the photo shoot with Alan last month, I was telling him that dyscalculia and dysgraphia have only been around really for 5-6 years as something that's real. I mean, they've always been
I
around.
super struggle with that a little bit too. So I'm like glad you specifically brought that up, because it's been something that along the way I realized like well, in college I struggled with dyscalculia a lot, but I was like super in denial about it. So I like struggled harder than necessary about it probably too. But yeah, totally.
Yeah, so it's very interesting that all these different art forms and things like that are kind of shedding this light on neurodivergence and what that means for the people with these different things. I mean, like, with you, you know, ADHD and dyscalculia and things like that. With me, it's ADHD, dyscalculia, OCD, depression, and dysgraphia. I remember when I first told my parents what I had discovered about myself, my dad looks at me and goes, "Huh, you got a little bit of everything, don't you?"
Yeah, it's kind of interesting though, because I like don't I like kind of questions like sometimes like where like because I think like neurodivergence is like helpful and like to use and describe things, but it's also the kind of thing where like well I have a hard time with like certain like binaries generally, but like I think that like I don't know if anyone is really neurotypical or like I don't know. It's like I think sometimes it's like really helpful for us to have like the language and containers, but they're also like really limiting. And then we have to like there's like a lot of nuances that probably exist there. So I think that like it's been really helpful for me to understand how my brain works better. And so like ADHD and like having a diagnosis was extremely helpful because then it was like, oh well these certain tools are like helpful for people who think this way, or these tools are like helpful. So it's like it was helpful for like pointing me in the direction for like the stuff that was like meant for me and maybe the stuff that wasn't. But I think that there's so many like versions of that exist, and like at some point like yeah, so I'm really glad that I've been like talking to someone about like maybe being on other spectrums too. So I'm hoping that like if I find out other things, it just kind of helps me point me to the stuff that is like for me and not for me a little bit easier. And I think that's like where the diagnosis kind of helps. I think it also like super helps roll back some shame. Like when I was in college, I was like really struggling. Like I've always kind of struggled with math. And I think like while I've like done really well, like musically, like in different realms, like I think sometimes like I would have to like interact with sheet music or like the way I learned with music differently. I was like very like I learned by ear really well. I learned like in a tactile way, and then I think I sometimes struggled with like I guess dyscalculia is related to symbols. I think sometimes reading sheet music like and processing it at the same speed that I need to play it was like sometimes difficult. So I think some amount of my practicing was like the memorization, which I'm sure is true for everyone too. But when I was taking music theory, I was like I knew the information, but I'd get stuff wrong on the test. And there's like there's like auditory things involved with music theory. So if they play it and you have to remember it, I have like an auditory processing disorder as ADHD. So like I like trying to like translate it like immediately into like symbols was like hard for my brain to do at the speed that I think I needed to, but I would like interpret the information I think just differently. So it's like what I did with the information I think was like I think we all process information and stimuli differently. So I think that's like I think part of it. I don't know.
No, I totally get it. That's
Yeah.
absolutely fabulous and it's extremely introspective.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people have that introspect on themselves and kind of look at it. And then actually this kind of segues into what else I wanted to talk to you about. Another thing that you speak about in your poetry book a little bit, and it's very kind of short and to the point. Poems here is if I can find find one of them. It was therapy or EMDR discovery. And you have about 3 or 4 of them, and they just kind of talk about your journey of discovering who you are as a person and kind of your identity in a way. One point you say, "Oh, I'm attracted to women, but I want to have a family," but you end the poem with shit.
Yeah, so I think that like figuring out like my gender and like, sexual experience was like a little bit like wobbly, and I think that can like true for a lot of people. And I think that like we live in like a very like I don't know heteronormative and culture, and like there's like a lot of like I can't think of the phrase that I want. This is really good like uh yeah, but like compulsive heteronormativity, I think is like some of it. Like we just like when you're taught like that certain things are the way that you move through things, you just kind of you try to make that work instead of like thinking about like what do I actually want to do. Yeah, so I think that like yeah, I think it's really hard to like explain. I think sometimes like where my sexuality is because I think it's really fluid, but I also I'm glad that I being non-binary has been like really important to me and is like really helpful. But it's like interesting because I think I'm like gay for other non-binary people. When people like who don't understand what non-binary means, so they'll be like, "What does that even mean?" That's like very specific, but also doesn't make sense to me. I don't know. But I think that like when I started to date women, I understood my gender experience more too. So like I feel like we're not doing the same thing. And that felt like really confusing because I was like, I thought that I was yeah. So but then but then if I meet a non-binary person, like regardless of what's happening with their body, I'm like, oh, this is like we are doing the same thing, but it's like it's kind of hard to define, and I think that's like why I try to put it in words too, is because it's like maybe if we have language for it more, it'll make more sense.
Right.
But yeah, but I've enjoyed like trying to like figure out like through like dating experiences, I like learn things that do and don't work, and like that's an ongoing process that like is also very fluid and like changes over time. And then yeah, I think sometimes like we like to think that as soon as we figure it out, we're just done. But it's like, oh, I figured out how it is right now, and then you just have more stuff to figure out sometimes. Both, I think, gender and sexuality are just much more fluid than like we're taught. I don't know.
No, and I completely agree. And wise words, Jess. That's absolutely fabulous that you said that, because I feel the same way. I feel that, well, I mean, you could take it two steps further and say that everything is a journey and there's an ebb and flow to everything that goes on in your life. And just because something works or feels right in that time frame doesn't mean it's not going to change in a year, in 2 years, in 20 years. So I think that's a really healthy perspective to have. And I think that's really cool. I think it's very cool that you touch on that kind of throughout the book. And we're almost on this mini journey with you of self-discovery and kind of discovering where you're at in these different parts of the book. There were a couple points that kind of made me giggle within the book, because I'm like, yeah, that kind of mirrors what I did back,
Yeah.
back 10 years ago. So,
And the process of the book is kind of interesting too, because it like takes a long time to have this many poems. So then, like by the time you're done writing it, it's like, cool. Well, I'm a different person than when I wrote this, and this poem. But maybe I can publish them, and people will like be witness to some of that anyway. So I think there's like a certain vulnerability that I felt in this too, being like, well, I'm in a different spot than like I was when I wrote some of these, but that doesn't mean they're not still valuable for like what they can demonstrate too. I'm really excited to like write another one now, because I'm like, there's all this stuff that like the poem hasn't come out yet, but like it lives inside of me now, and I just really want to write about it. But yeah, I think it's interesting because I think like showing people parts of your journey feels like vulnerable in a different way than being like, I'm done now, here it is. I don't know. So it feels like I like it, like there's a certain amount that I know, like I don't know, if people find like art, they'll like attach it to like they might have this like more like permanent feeling of like who they are that's like much more fluid too. So I think that's like an interesting part of like the book lives forever, and the book doesn't change, but like I'm gonna change a lot. So I think there's like something that feels like exciting but also like weird about that. I don't know.
it's a sense of permanence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that like if I didn't have a grant, or if I didn't have like more reasons to put out a book, I just would have kept editing these poems forever, and I just would have held on to them, and nobody would like, people would that I share with them in public would experience them when I share them, and then. But yeah, I think that's like an interesting thing that I've been like learning through like the publishing journey.
Yeah.
I think that it's like interesting to think about like how capitalism impacts art and different things too. I don't know. I just been thinking about a lot of stuff like with this process, because I think the way that I value it is sometimes like a little bit different than I like need to within like I don't know capitalism and bills and stuff. So it's just like it's just like an interesting world to exist in now.
Oh, definitely. I fully understand that one. As much as we value art in society, whatever that capacity is, there is a business side to it. And it's not just for the artists to put food on the table or clothes on their back. I mean, it's also about, the editor and the publisher or the team that you've got working behind you that you need to feed as well. So I don't know, it's this weird conglomeration of business and creativity, but something that I learned very early on, art is extremely subjective, no
Mm-hmm.
matter which one it is, whether that's music or photography or painting or books or anything like that. So it is. It's a
Yeah.
very weird conglomeration of all these
Yeah.
different things going together. And
Yeah.
that sounds like something you've learned as well, not just with this book, but with your own kind of life's journey. So you had mentioned
Yeah.
making another book. When can we expect that? Is it in the works or is it just kind
That's
of
a really good question. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think that like in theme of like maybe I should name it the things that I was gonna name the websites I didn't make. I'm thinking that I might put out a book that's like kind of like sequel-ish to this one that's called Hat Juggler. And that it's like, okay, this was like me like not knowing what I'm doing. Here's the book where I do feel like I know what I'm doing. And I think that that would be kind of a cool book to put out too and be like here's like some of the journey that was a little bit more messy, and here's some of the journey that's like still messy, but like a little bit more focused. Too many hats I feel like is like it's like too many. I feel like I've been like getting to a zone where like I still have a lot of them, but they're enmeshed and they're like functioning in a much more like focused way, as much as I can focus with like I don't know, when I'm not taking ADHD meds or whatever. But yeah, I also really want to put out a book that's like all related to like sound and sonic and improv experiences and like experimental music. That was what my senior project was in college. Is I put a bunch of poems together that was about the experience of improv spaces. And I think improv spaces themselves are extremely healing. I think they like help open boxes. I think they like offer something much different, and I think it's actually like a way that people have like moved through PTSD and different things too. So I think it's like a space that I like want to foster, like both for myself and other people, but then also want to write about. And like I also just like I think there's something about maybe my functioning or something that just makes me really just love like sound experiences that are like sometimes surprising but also grounding. So yeah, I want to so I guess like Hat Jugglers, a Sonic one, and another one I've kind of like started playing around with. There's that house on 18th Avenue East that I have one poem in here about. That's like that really weird art house where they're just like it's stuffed with like stuff on the outside.
Oh
I
yes.
like want to kind of write a really like miniature book that's just like a bunch of poems about that house. I used to live on the next street over, and it felt like the house was like staring at me from like the other house I was at, or like it just
Yeah.
I think I have like a lot of different lenses that I just want to come at this house. So I'm planning on sending like the person that lives there a letter with my book and be like, hey, do you mind if I write a whole miniature book about your house? So I'm excited. I don't know if like they'll respond back or what that, but I feel like maybe I should ask them instead of just doing it. Even if it's like fine, I would prefer to like see how they feel about it. It's their house. It's
Right,
their
right.
baby.
And yeah, and to give people a little context, so in the city here in Duluth, there's a house where the owner has stuck toys and dolls and Barbies and stuffed animals, and I think at one point in time they had a trike. They literally super glue these things on the outside of their home in this cacophony of chaos. I think the first time I came across it was probably 8 years ago. I was in a band that we would practice at the house actually next door. And yeah, the first time I came across it, it stopped me dead in my tracks, and I just stared at the house because there's so much going on and so many different little faces looking at you. And at one point in time, I got creeped out because, all it is like
Yeah, it's like kind of
doll
a lot
heads.
to look at. It like makes you feel like very strange and very
Yes.
excited. Like I feel like you feel a lot of things like looking at it, and it just like it sparks my curiosity so much. Like what motivated them to do this, or like what problems have come up because they decided to do this, or like
Right.
at one point in time, like because I used to live in that area of Hillside, but then I moved later. So like every once in a while, when I was driving through that area, or I had a friend's house over there or something, I would like drive by it. And I remember driving by it once, and it was like totally burnt to a crisp. And then I was like,
Yes.
well, it kind of always looked like a fire hazard, but I guess like unfortunately that must have happened. So I felt like really like sad for them. And like I think the neighbor like watched me drive by slow, and they were just like staring me down. I was like, maybe I better not be weird, and I better keep driving. But then I drove past again later. I was like, I wonder if the house is just boring now, like if somebody else owns it, or if they just were like, that was a bad idea. But so I expected just like a normal house again, or I'm not sure what I expected. But instead, it looked like it did before. They like put a bunch of stuff outside again, and I think there was like a certain amount of poetry to that. So I think I just like, I don't know, I just would like to write a bunch of poems about it.
Yes. Well, I'm excited for the book on the house that has too many eyes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, too many eyes.
Yeah, or faces,
Too many,
or
yeah.
legs, or whatever it is. Anyway, Jess, thank you so much for joining me today and talking about your poetry book, yourself, your journey throughout life. There's so many little wise quips that you've got in there, and your book, like I said, is absolutely fabulous. I read it from cover to back as soon as you gave it to me. There were points that made me smile, there were points that made me giggle, there were points that made me cry. So you definitely hit the gamut with this book. I am super excited to read the next one, or to hear the next one if it comes out on an audiobook. If people want to meet you and find out what you got going on, they can join the Duluth Poetry Chapter. But you also have this book available at the Zeitgeist bookstore out in the West End
Yeah,
here in
Zenith.
Duluth.
Yeah. Yeah, so Zenith Bookstore has it. It could be found on my website, so if people want to connect with me there, if they like want to send me an email, or if they want to check out the book. I'm going to be updating it more so that there's a little bit more content over the next like weeks or so. Now that the book is here, yeah.
Fabulous. Jess, thank you so much again. It's been a pleasure knowing you and interviewing you today, and I'm excited to see what the future holds for you and for our friendship as well, for that matter.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much for taking interest in it and reaching out to me. I appreciate it a lot.
Of course, Jess, of course. You're an interesting character.
Thanks.
I mean that in the
Yeah.
best light.
Yeah. No, I took it that way. Thanks. You are too. I'm really, thank you for, including me. Yeah. Is there anything else that you wanted to know about the book, or anything else?
No, I think we're good. Is there anything that you wanted to touch upon?
I don't think so. Yeah, if you want, I can like, send you some pictures or something of more of the poems or something, or read some of them to you sometime. And then, yeah, if there's anything else you need, just let me know.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. All right. I will talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Crystal. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.